So we're playing our hand here about how we already think about the movie. We both have watched it. This is a Disney Pixar film. It is rated PG. So have that as your context. David, what I found interesting about this is that every film has some sort of notification, some sort of warnings that they include with the content. So here it says when you first play this on like Disney Plus, it says Disney Pixar PG, and then it says suggestive content and language. That's the very first thing that comes out of this. And I'm going to give a little intro about what this movie is about in a second here, but I just want to kind of let you know, like, how do you actually settle into this movie at first? The first thing that you see before you even click on anything is that this is a PG film. And then when you click on it, it tells you right away that what you're going to be viewing might have to you suggestive content and language, which I'll just kind of get it out of the way right now. Some of the language that you and I, David, talked about one-on-one, as well as I'm going to tell everybody who is listening now, is that some of the language that is there is explicitly these words: sexy in relation to a particular crush, stripper music, not necessarily the sounds of stripper, quote unquote, stripper music, although I guess you could kind of say that they wove that into the kind of the sonic score, but stripper music in the sense of that one of the 13-year-old friends of the main character says that she likes stripper music. Okay, so that brings up a bunch of questions, but then the main character talks about how she's caught gyrating, as well as tells her mother that she likes to gyrate, which, when you look at a definitional understanding of gyration, it's like standing in one location while the hips move. So you got a spectrum between the outrage that people had at Elvis for his gyrations to today, where gyrations are usually, and as is depicted in the film, where again, pardon the visuals that I'm giving, where it's like four on the floor, hands and feet are planted on the floor, so in one position, while the bottom is moving back and forth and up and down. So if that disgusts you, in your mind, imagine seeing that with your own eyes and then sharing that visual displeasure with your children. And then lastly, one of the language uses that I kind of underscored was the use of daddy, but not in the mommy and daddy sort of, well, yes, I guess in the mommy and daddy sort of understanding, but it was talking about how one of the pop stars was a daddy to her. What's that, David? What's that little device?
Virtual pet thing.
Yeah, virtual pet thing. That's the technical term.
When I was growing up, they were called Tamagotchis. So I'm not sure
basically that's what it is, a Tamagotchi. Yeah. I don't know if that's what they call it, but she said that was her daddy was the daddy to the little baby Tamagotchi digital animal that she was the mommy and he was the daddy of it. Obviously she's kind of living in this fantasy world about it, but it is a kind of a more adult theme there with that kind of language. David, did you? I mean, maybe I should have done the intro to what this movie is all about first, but I just wanted to underscore that. Is there any more language or not content stuff, but just language that will maybe help when we talk about what this movie is about, that people will be able to see, like, oh, how did they put that sort of language in there? Anything else that you?
Right. Well, there was one thing that I didn't actually catch, but it's in another something else that I was reading about it. Is at one point in the movie when she's like at this birthday party, and this will all become clear here in a second. Yeah. But they use the language of like riding her. And if you see that in terms
yeah.
of like a sexual content sort of situation, like all of a sudden now you've introduced some very adult themes into this children's movie.
Yes.
And again, it's
subtle.
you'll talk about
Yes.
this in a second, but I mean, because
Yeah.
she turns into a panda in the movie essentially.
Yep.
So you get like what's going on. Like this is kind of like a mascot sort of thing to an extent too. But if you still understand that she's a 13-year-old girl, like all of a sudden this now becomes severely inappropriate.
Yeah, I
But
think.
why don't you cue up the movie?
Okay. Okay. So some of the main themes in this movie will address puberty, personal independence, and recasting familial and cultural norms. That's kind of my little main takeaways here. So here's the spoiler alert. Sorry, not sorry. So this is, as they describe it as well, Disney describes this as well as a coming of age story. That is true. Of a 13-year-old Asian Canadian girl named May. May views herself as an adult, but is depicted as an overly disciplined child with an overbearing mother. The setting is in 2002 in Toronto, which is, I think, is very important because today that person would be David, like our age. We're 34. A person around that time, being a 13-year-old today, do the math, 33 years old. So this is purposely targeted to you and I who have young children. I at least that's how I'm kind of seeing like the purposefulness of the setting. It's supposed to appeal to our own childhoods, and then to be purposely reflective in our own parenting styles, which. So I do think that there is the socio-political angle to this movie. May is conflicted between her growing independence and the expectation of honoring her parents. So maybe, David, one of the things that we could talk about initially here is the fourth commandment and at least a Christian understanding. Of course, now there are other religious themes in the movie that are not Christian. They are ancestral type of religiosity, but still there's an early on dig at religions that have that are based in a god. So theism is already like a salvo is shot against Christianity, because she says something along the lines of like, we don't just worship a god, we have ancestors. So so there's that. The meat and potatoes of the movie is when her notebook of drawings is found depicting a crush that May's mother discovers underneath her bed, and she, the mother, rushes to judgment. And this is a theme that is held until the final scenes of the movie, of an overbearing, steamrolling, can't get in a word in edgewise relationship between her and the mother, but also the mother to everybody else. Now, this embarrassing moment reveals a family secret that an ancient ancestor had blessed the women of her family with an ability to turn into a red panda, but uncontrollably so when emotions go unchecked. So a majority of the movie builds upon the independence May gains from first encountering her red panda self, a messy, stinky, not perfect, crazy, and monstrous self, to then being able to control it, unlike the other women of her family before. And this independence is unapproved, and a ritual is suggested as the solution to the problem, which the women in her family have done before, have done this before themselves. And the exorcism ritual and religious notes of the movie are interspersed throughout, casting both a good and bad notions of what that means. The film I think, is purposely transformative. It goes from codependency to independence, religious restraint to a la carte religiosity, a tethered belief system to commercialized choice. So that's where I think I'll end my little initial commentary right now, and then I'll pick up on later after we talk a little bit about some of my closing thoughts about this film. David, like I said, I didn't want to watch this film, but I thought if I'm going to watch this film, I'm going to write I'm going to write a good review about it. So
Sure.
hopefully that was a helpful depiction. David, do you have anything else to fill in the blanks here of what maybe I missed out on telling our viewers and listeners?
Yeah. Well, part of it too is like, I don't want to like discount the fact that yes, it is. I mean, it's awkward for kids when they're growing up from childhood into adulthood.
Right.
Like and I feel like the movie does capture that well. Like this sort of like strange awkwardness. Because at first, when May or whatever has this boy crush, at first she doesn't have a crush on that kid, but all of her friends do, and then all of a sudden, like she embarks upon having a crush on this kid too, and I mean, emotions do run wild; they are unchecked, and that's part of becoming an adult is trying to figure out how to do that. But the part that always, that probably bothers me the most about the movie is that the mother is always the antagonist.
Yeah. And
so to a certain extent, instead of saying, hey, growing up and becoming an adolescent is hard, or growing into adulthood is going to be a challenge, and your parents will be there to help you along the way. The idea is that, no, you just disregard your parents. You don't do what they tell you. You have to value your friendships more than you value your family. Like listen to your friends rather than listening to your parents. And it paints the parents as being like these evil, again, and in the film, is her mom overbearing? Certainly, right? To a certain extent, she is very, very protective and very, very like, clingy. And I think that's, obviously because she has this demon thing inside of her or whatever.
Right.
But it's not to say that parents should be overbearing with their children or something like that either. But to a certain extent, you can't go ahead with a message in this movie that says that kids should not listen to their parents or, willfully, ignore them or do something against them. It's just not, it's not good.